if we're not scrolling consciously, it starts to like move into like our stress response. And when our stress is activated, we aren't thinking rationally as much. We're absorbing it. And like you had said earlier in this conversation, when you just keep going, right? You just keep scrolling, you keep now maybe you've liked a few of those things and you're getting more similar things like that. And so now you're getting flooded with this stuff and high stress in your body that has consequences, and it can contribute to you seeing your journey, your story, your relationship, your home in a way that you didn't intend to.
Welcome to the Well-Nourished Mother podcast. This is a show for women who desire a deeper, more mindful and meaningful pregnancy, birth, and motherhood experience. In this space, we bring so much reverence to the rite of passage that is the maiden to mother journey. I'm your host, Lauren Fortuna Flock, founder of Nest and Nourish. I'm an ex-nurse turned birth worker, holistic nutritionist, and somatic coaching student with a fiery passion for birth prep and motherhood prep that blends the head and the heart. Join me for inspiring conversations with experts, mothers, and all-around badass wise women, exploring all the ways we can nourish ourselves, body, mind, and heart, in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. This space will help you cultivate the knowledge, practices, and resources you need to be the most embodied, vibrant, authentic, intuitive, and well-nourished mother you deserve to be. So welcome. Let's do this. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 10. I can't believe it. I'm feeling really proud that I've stuck with this. I've been consistent. I've enjoyed it so much. It's really become something I don't really consider work. It's definitely more on the side of play and fun, which is amazing. So today I'm celebrating 10 episodes. If you've been along for the ride the whole time, thank you. If you're just listening for the very first time, thank you. Either way, if you're loving the show, please share an episode on social media, rate and review the show on Apple or Spotify, or come on over and join the community on Instagram at Nest and Nourish. Okay, on to today's topic. We are living and mothering in the digital age. I don't think any generation before us has had such a huge tie to social media as we have. Personally, being a part of the motherhood, birth worker, online world is very interesting. You definitely get a peek into all these different sort of subcultures or even like motherhood tropes that are out there. The idea for this episode came when I saw a post by someone I follow. Her name is Amanda Texera. She's free as a mother on Instagram. And I just love a lot of what she shares. So in this post that she shared that inspired this episode, she shared 2 slides. One said, motherhood culture I don't participate in, and the other was motherhood culture I do participate in. And she then listed a bunch of different things under each. If you want to check out the post, it's linked for you in the show notes. But this post got me thinking, there really are so many little motherhood tropes. I don't even know if calling them tropes is the totally correct use of that word, but I can't seem to find another way to properly describe this. But you'll find out in the episode what I mean. But this conversation with Amanda isn't just about this Instagram post, it's so much more. We really go deep into discernment, trusting yourself as a mother, learning to set boundaries for yourself and your social media consumption. We get a little spicy and touch on Fed is best messaging and why we think women deserve so much more than this. We discern between what's normal and what's normalized in our culture around birth and motherhood. We touch on mom shaming and guilt and how these feelings are ways your body is communicating with you, plus so much more. We really do weave together a really interesting conversation where we both dissect and celebrate the motherhood messaging that can bombard us on social media. So I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Even if you don't fully agree with some of the opinions on here, great. Discernment, that's the goal, right? But I do hope that this episode will open up a larger conversation about some of these tropes or subcultures or just the motherhood messaging that's thrown around. I hope it helps you step back and really take a look at your own consumption of social media and how it makes you feel. And more than anything, this is a reminder that you get to be the authority in your own life. Becoming aware of this messaging allows you to really step back and tune in to what feels good and aligned for you as a mother. All right, so a little bit about Amanda. Amanda is a mother to 3 sons and a clinical therapist and consultant. She uses holistic approaches in both her professional and personal life. Amanda's mothering journey began with her first son 5 years ago and has evolved over the years. She started out following mainstream norms in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood that perpetuate separation and found herself feeling disconnected and lost. Between her first and second son, she learned how to lead with her intuition, which has resulted in showing up more authentically for herself and her family. It's become a passion for Amanda to talk about this path in hopes it inspires mothers to question the status quo and culture of pregnancy, birth, and motherhood, and to live more consciously. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome, Amanda. It's so nice to chat with you. Instagram is both a super weird place and also a really great means of connecting with like-minded people. And I knew right away when I randomly found you on there that we had a lot in common. And more than that, I just really, really respect the content and messaging that you share. And I think it's all really important and so grounded. And yeah, so I'm really excited to see where this conversation takes us. But first things first, can you share with us one word or phrase to describe your current season of motherhood?
Yes. Well, thank you, first of all, for yeah, saying that about Instagram. I totally agree. And yeah, so I think the first thing that comes up for me is acceptance for my word of like the season I'm in. I have cycled through a lot of like wanting to embody these different like words or themes, like slow living or like finding more rhythm. And I've come back each time again to like, okay, like I just need more radical acceptance of like, this is how things are right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So that's where I am. Yeah, that's where I am right now.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like it's so easy to get caught up in like wanting to change or evolve or like, I don't know, like do it the way moms on Instagram do it when really,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about acceptance for where you are right now in the present moment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The moment to moment thing is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about who you are, your work in the world, and what you're passionate about.
I am a mother to 3 sons, 5, 2, and 10 months. And I also have a partner of over a decade. And I'm a therapist. So I'm a licensed therapist, and I primarily work on or focus on holistic approaches to emotional wellness and healing. So I might work with people with a trauma background or just transition to motherhood, couples with a communication problem or needing some guidance there. And I also do some consulting on the side as well for people who don't want that structured therapy approach.
Now, I know, like you said, you have 3 children. And I know that the way you mother started to shift between your first and second child. Can you kind of start at the beginning with your story and share with us what your journey into motherhood looked like?
Yeah, I feel like many moms that I've connected with who kind of share our values and outlook on motherhood, I've really resonated a lot with the moms who said like their first was like their teacher, it was kind of like their moment for like shifting into like who they really wanted to be. And for me, yeah, my first was really pointed out to me how disconnected I really was. He brought forth a ton of wounds that I thought I had kind of already healed, being this like educated clinical social worker who does this for a living and like knows what she wants. And yeah, motherhood was extremely humbling in that. I deferred a lot in that journey, in that first pregnancy. Like I did a lot of like the mainstream stuff. I found the OBGYN and then eventually found the, medical midwife that would go to the hospital. I was pathologized a ton in my pregnancy. I was scared. I very much found myself a victim to my pregnancy, and, everyone around me kind of projecting their birth trauma onto me about how scary and dangerous birth is. And I really, really embodied that. I really took that on. I absorbed it and kind of had that be my reality, even though there was this other part of me that was like, no, none of this is normal. None of this is normal. This doesn't feel right. And I know now that that was my intuition. But at the time, I didn't really have the community to echo that. It was all people who just kind of echoed the defer to others, disconnect from your body, disconnect from yourself. Like, this is the normal thing to do. Do it this way. And so, yeah. So after I had my first son, I really, and I struggled with a lot of other things after that. I worked full time, 5 days a week, long hours, just away from him. And again, I have a lot of examples of like suffering the consequences of that disconnection and just kind of ignoring like what I really wanted versus like how it's just supposed to be, how everyone else is just doing it. So between my first and second, I had made some friends that kind of shared some of my values that my intuition was telling me, like birth isn't a medical event, and you should be able to breastfeed your baby if you want to, and you can trust yourself, and just little things like that, even just small things like that really just started to like come into my consciousness from my community. And I was like, oh my God, it kind of felt like, wait a minute, like I'm not the only one who like thinks like that. But everyone else is so scared and like, tell me more, like, give me more. Right. Like I just started to be like, just wanting to be like a sponge, like, okay, this is actually normal. People actually do live in the way that I've always kind of felt drawn to, mothered in the way that I felt drawn to, birthed in the way that I felt drawn to. And so, yeah, so I found that community, and yeah, most of that was online. And that just became part of my normal reality. And so with my second, I went on to have a home birth, exclusively, breastfeed. I changed up my entire work lifestyle. I went into private practice. I stopped working, 40 hours at a local children's hospital, and I went into private practice and reduced my hours substantially so that I could be home with my babies. And then, yeah, I figured out how to make that work because obviously with changing big things like that comes with risk, and it's scary. And yeah, we've made it work. We've really found our rhythm in that. And then my third son was born last October, and I had an unassisted birth for him, and that was really great too. I feel like each one of my pregnancies and my journeys through motherhood just kind of went closer and closer to like myself and like believing in myself. And I'm totally not saying that you have to birth unassisted in order to believe in yourself. Like, no, not at all. But just for me, it was less deferment to others. All these kind of milestones in motherhood, like pregnancy, birth, postpartum, so forth and so forth, just kind of became more like not easy, but I don't know, less stressful or less pressured. Like I had to do something that other people were doing, or like that, like the mainstream was doing.
When you're like worried about kind of pleasing other people and you're shifting to like only pleasing yourself, like that really changes how everything feels, right? It feels, at least in my experience, it makes everything feel easier in a way because there's only you that you have to look to for acceptance or
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And my first experience with motherhood really, that's, I think, the main wound that like my first son brought to my attention was my pleasing others, my lack of boundaries. Like I'm doing things to appease other people and their ideas that aren't even founded in, I don't know, like even evidence. They're not even founded
Yeah.
in like just what feels, yeah, biologically right or normal or
Yeah.
yeah.
It's amazing the power of the like overculture and how
Mm-hmm.
we accept things as normal that aren't normal. They're just normalized.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I'm hearing in your story is that the power of community was a big kind of stepping stone for you to really start to be like, okay, like this is all okay and I can do this. And my intuition is trying to tell me something and it is okay to to follow it and trust it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other people's stories and like seeing how they were doing it or like what they were willing to share about how they were mothering really changed things for me. Like it wasn't even necessarily like absorbing some form of education. It was it was listening to other women and how in their stories.
Yeah. Yeah. So you recently shared a post online where
Mm-hmm.
you kind of shared two lists. One list was titled Motherhood Culture I Don't Participate in, and the other one was Motherhood Culture I Do Participate in. So I'd love to dive into this. I want to know more about what inspired this post and then yeah, maybe we can chat a little bit about the details.
Yeah, so I feel like what inspired the post is, well, what I do primarily for work in both my clinical therapy and consultation is nervous system awareness. And so that has also really become something big for me that I've integrated in my life when it comes to like meeting these different parts of myself and how it is that I am showing up in the world, what feels authentic versus what feels like I'm just pleasing. And that nervous system awareness is really crucial for that. So, what inspired that was just trying to observe my own consumption of social media and particularly with motherhood cultures on social media because I feel like there's all these different little subcultures of like
Mhm.
what's being normalized about motherhood. And again, yep, what's common is not normal. And I feel like that's something I've really kind of observed, at least for myself, is just that, yeah, what's just because it's common doesn't make it normal.
Mhm.
And I don't think it serves me to like consume particular content that is like normalizing this a kind of culture
Mhm.
that is just very unaligned with my values.
Mhm. Mhm. I just love some of them on your list because, yeah, of course, I agree with
Mm-hmm.
almost all of them. So things that you don't participate in, like husband bashing, which
Mm-hmm.
is like rampant. It's amazing. And like you said, there's all
Right.
these little
Right.
subcultures on social media. So husband bashing, losing yourself, the idea of losing yourself in motherhood,
Yeah.
or no intimacy because of kids, or fed is best. That's a
Mm-hmm.
controversial one. Or
Unfortunately.
yes,
Yeah.
right? Or,
Yeah.
this idea that you're just surviving the day every day or bouncing back postpartum. Yeah, like which way should we go? Let's see, which one should we talk about
Do
here?
the husband one because I think that although we could absolutely, yeah, anyone is great. I could go on and on about either one of them, but that's one for me that I noticed. So if I am just mindlessly absorbing content with zero awareness about how it's making me feel, it totally like I absorb stuff. Like I'm just the kind of person that like absorbs the energy in the room.
Hmm.
If I consume too much of something like a particular piece of information, like I kind of start to like see that, as like I find evidence for it. And I know that about myself. So I know I have to be really mindful of like what's mine and what's not. And the husband one is a big one because that is huge on social media of just like your husband being this like additional child and they don't get it and you're carrying so much of the load and they don't care or like just like little like subtle ones too where it's like I just need a break and you're going to the bathroom and taking 20 minutes taking a poop, like those joking ones too where it's like
Yeah.
if I just consume that stuff, I will 100% start to see that in my life,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
even though like my husband is not, he's so supportive, he's so loving, he's so like he's my partner, and I don't want to disregard also like anyone's experience of like you should see it the way I'm seeing it because like if your husband is actually acting like a child, like that's not okay. Right? Like this
Yeah.
isn't funny,
Mm-hmm.
like this is
Yeah.
yeah, it's not okay. Like
Yeah. And it's like this weird, like infantilizing your partner. And like the thing that I think of is like, well, if there is an issue, why aren't you communicating about it?
mhm.
Instead, you're making like, and I know a lot of it is just to be funny and,
Yeah,
grow your Instagram account and get clicks and likes and all of that garbage.
right, right.
But yeah, like that's what I think. It's like if there is an issue, why aren't you communicating about it? Or are you trapped in this like fawning response or people pleasing, kind of conditioning where it's like,
Mhm.
well, yep, he gets to go and sit on the toilet for 20 minutes while I'm
Mhm.
drowning. So are you
Mhm.
not saying like, hey, I need your help? Hey, I need
Mhm.
something? Like that's what comes to my mind when I see that one.
Yeah, and then so many people like it and like find it to be relatable,
Hmm.
and then there's like this like then I think that's where that starts to become like a normalized thing.
Hmm.
Like, oh, it's not just my husband that does that. Look
Yeah.
at hundreds of other women's husbands do that too. And so this must be just a
Hmm.
normal thing I have to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
part that I don't like, I can't participate in.
Yeah. And like, really, what we're talking about here is like our ability to think critically and use discernment when we're on
Mm-hmm,
social media, really,
mm-hmm,
right? It's like being much more conscious about what it is you're looking at.
right.
This is coming to my head. I randomly went on TikTok and like TikTok to me is not my thing. I don't know how to use it. I feel old when I'm on there. Like it's just, I don't know what's happening over there. But I
Yeah.
recently was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. I like posted one reel about this podcast just to see what would
Mm-hmm,
happen. But anyways, so the app doesn't know me either. So it's showing me very random things. But I noticed right away that it kept showing me, I was going to say reels. See, I don't know what I'm talking about. TikToks, videos.
I don't know. I don't have a TikTok, so you're educating me. Yep.
But it just kept showing me all these reels about death, like people sharing their stories about losing their babies and like just these. And I
Whoa.
felt myself getting very upset. And I left thinking, like, whoa, like that just made me feel awful. And I
Right.
can see how if you're just mindlessly scrolling through and
Yeah.
watching video
Mm-hmm,
after video about that,
mm-hmm,
yeah, like that is going to affect your nervous system state. And you think about like young kids doing this too, and just scrolling, and it's never
yeah.
ending. There's no like signal to your brain that there's an end and that you could stop and move on to something else. So yeah, it's all about
Right.
like discernment and thinking critically about what you're consuming and doing it mindfully. The other one I really like is, of course, fed is best. Let's go there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, let's please go there. Yeah, I think this one, it really feeds into a culture of like conditioning women to accept breadcrumbs,
Mm,
because I just am so surprised that people don't find this statement condescending.
yeah,
Like that is the bare minimum. And like, of
yeah,
course, a mother is going to feed her baby, even
yeah.
if it wasn't how she planned on doing it. Of course, she's going to feed her baby.
Hmm.
Like to say that, well, fed is best is just like the way you wanted to do it doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? The way, if you wanted to breastfeed, that doesn't matter because fed is best, and
Yeah.
I think it just really paints a picture of like how we kind of subtly condition mothers to just accept breadcrumbs. Like what
Mm-hmm.
you wanted out of this doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Your needs, your desires don't matter as long as the baby is healthy and happy, as long as the baby is fed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which any mother would want. Like, you know what I mean? That's the
Yeah.
condescending part that I find about that statement is just like, of course, the mother's going to feed her baby. Like, it's just the
Yeah.
bare minimum. It's the bare
Yeah.
minimum. And how dare women to want to raise that bar
Mm-hmm.
over the bare minimum? That's what
Mm-hmm.
that kind of says to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the whole it's so illuminating to me the amount of wounding that people are holding around this whole topic because
Yes.
you say breast is best and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you're shaming me. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how shame works. Like that's
Right. Right.
like that's not how that works. Like stating something is the biological norm
Yeah.
doesn't take away from the fact that not everyone can do it and that's
Right.
okay. But I think
Mm-hmm.
the bigger issue usually is that people aren't getting the support that they need to do it, whether
Yes.
it's at home, whether it's from professionals in their own social circles, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's women needing the resources, the support, and the normalization of breastfeeding.
Right. Yeah, I really think that's spot on. And this projection, right, of like one, people calling other women mom shamers for talking about that, or even saying fed is the bare minimum. That wound that you're talking about, I feel like there's so much grief there. There's so much like breastfeeding grief
Mm-hmm.
over, potentially not having been able to breastfeed and then just
Mm-hmm.
being told by somebody fed is best. It doesn't matter. Like you just got to do
Mm-hmm.
it this way. Right. And yeah. And I guess my whole point in really speaking out against that is really I just want women to take away that they deserve better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true. It's like your grief is swept under the rug. And it's the same in
Right.
birth as well. If
Yep.
you didn't get the birth that you wanted, well, it's okay. The
Mm-hmm.
baby is healthy. Well, what about
Exactly.
me? What about what I wanted?
Right.
And it's funny, like this idea that if you can't do the thing, then well, the thing can't be called the best way to do it. Like I personally wanted a home
Yeah.
birth. I wanted physiological birth, all of that. I ended up
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital with an epidural and every other intervention. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I had a vaginal birth, but a
Mm-hmm.
catheter and all these other, in an
Yeah.
IV, like all these interventions, right? When
Yeah.
I hear that home birth or physiological birth is the physiological norm, I don't feel shame. And if I
Right.
did, it would be a sign to me that I have some wounds that need healing. I have some of my own story to process, not
Exactly.
saying like, well, do you know what I mean?
How dare you shame me? Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah. All birth is natural birth,
yeah,
like
yes,
just it is
yes,
kind of normalizing this, like
yes.
accepting breadcrumbs. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
can we not? Right? Like,
Yeah.
I, I, I think you're spot on too. With just like if I'm feeling a certain way about it, that really kind of tells me what's going on, right? And
Mm.
in my like inner world and my nervous system. And yeah, I feel like guilt is a communicator, and people really run away from it a lot of the time, and
Yeah.
project that elsewhere, or just say that that's
Mm-hmm.
coming from, the mom who's sharing the breastfeeding content, or who's sharing the physiological birth content. I now feel that resentment or something from that unresolved trauma, and I'm going to take it out on her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I mean, I don't blame these women. I think they're being gaslighted by our society by saying like, no, like that wasn't traumatic. That was normal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Like 1 in 3 births in the US are due to cesarean. Like
Mm.
that's normal. Like
Yeah.
you're not allowed to feel traumatized or violated or any sort of way. So
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Other women are not our are not our enemy.
No, exactly. Yeah. And again, I think it's like really created by these corporations, right? It's messaging. They're trying to, in a way, like pin people against each other, right? It makes
Right,
more sales. It, increases engagement on posts and all that
right.
crap.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just going back to like the social media stuff too, it's just, especially like as somebody who is practicing as a therapist, I just can't participate in this stuff that's just enabling this like disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen a reel the other day from someone who I don't follow anymore because of just it just her content didn't serve me anymore, right? It was like it's producing this like I don't know, like I'm feeling this like either sort of way or judgment or like, you know what, like this isn't what I'm on this app for. I'm not here to feel stress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to feel like held in community and that like, what speaks to me and my values. And she had shared that she had chose to use formula after however many weeks or whatever, and that was okay, and that like that's what she wanted, like she made this choice because that's what she wanted. And then when she was doing that, she started to experience like guilt for not breastfeeding. And so this isn't about what she chose or what she didn't choose, it's about the message she sent to like hundreds of thousands of women who follow her. And that was, she had shared that she found out that her hormones were gaslighting her because she wasn't breastfeeding anymore.
Hmm.
And I just find that like we're telling ourselves that like we can't listen to our body, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like I'm feeling this certain way, and gaslighting is a manipulation, it's an abusive tactic. Our hormones are not doing that to us.
Mm-hmm.
They're not abusing us, they're not manipulating us, they're our body is communicating to us all the time. And that, again, that doesn't mean she had to like change her choice, right? But just the
Mm-hmm.
message that like if we're just mindlessly absorbing that content, we might like feel that way. We might like integrate that into our life and say like, oh yeah, you know what, I guess my hormones were gaslighting me too, and me
Mm-hmm.
feeling this certain way or my body telling me this certain thing is meaningless.
Mm-hmm. And it's like there will always be people who choose, what's maybe against the biological or physiological norm. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Mm-hmm.
making that choice from a place of, you know, intuition, and there's so many nuanced
Right,
reasons why
right.
somebody would make a choice like that, right?
Yep.
But we can't then, yeah, like hate our bodies for the consequences of those choices, like the biological, physiological consequences of those choices, right? Like, of course, your
Right.
hormones are gonna shift and change when you stop giving milk. Like that would happen to any woman under any circumstance. So yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree that this messaging that now we can't even trust our bodies. It's like we're trying to use our brains to override and tell a story, create a narrative that like this is all
Mm-hmm.
okay and I didn't do anything wrong. And
Right.
and
Right.
I'm not saying that it's wrong to use formula or whatever. It's
Of
just that
course.
if you're
Right.
if you're going against the biological norm of your body, there are going to be consequences, and that's okay. You just have to be prepared to
Yeah.
manage that and not just automatically assume that your body is gaslighting you or
Yeah.
wrong or
Yeah.
broken or bad. Yeah.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot of postpartum depression and anxiety, and just how some women experience that after what is usually a traumatic birth. And yeah, and just kind of hearing women, even in my own practice, talk about like, oh, it's me. I need better coping strategies. I think I just need medication, or I think I need like it's just my biology. I was more high at risk for this based on whatever anxiety running in my family or depression running in my family. And that to me, it just reminded me so much of what you just said of like people kind of taking on this responsibility for like their what is actually like a healthy response to a stressful situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And just
Mm-hmm.
what you had said about the consequences your body might face when you stop breastfeeding is just it's actually a healthy response to a situation you're in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's an intelligent response.
For sure. So I'd love to chat a little bit about, the motherhood culture you do participate in. So you had listed some
Mm-hmm.
things like slowing down, following your intuition, birth as a rite of passage, cycle breaking, healing wounds. Yeah, like I love all of these. Can you tell us a little bit about, let's see, maybe like raising children as sacred work? I like the idea of that one.
Yeah. So when I kind of said to like I participate in a culture that looks at raising children as sacred work is that it's because that's what aligns with like what I want. Like I can't just consume all these like all this content and like subcultures around motherhood and not expect it to influence me in some way in my nervous system. And when I see other women talk about the sacred work of like mothering and just like the acceptance that kind of like surrounds that sacred work of just like accepting our children for like where they are developmentally, accepting the newborn snuggles or the slowness of postpartum and how that's required of us and providing our milk to feed our babies and you know following their lead and play and nature and being present with them. That speaks to me personally for what I want out of motherhood, how I want to remember motherhood. And of course, I'll always be a mother, but what I really mean is how I want to look back, while I was like actively raising little kids, and
Mm-hmm.
I want that to be my story.
Yeah, and I think, there's always there's a lot in that this overculture of how, being a stay-at-home mom is worthless and, not worth your time and isn't valued. So, yeah, when you're shifting your perspective and seeing raising children as sacred work, it is easier to slow
Mm-hmm.
down. It is easier to turn the like maybe what some people would call mundane into like magic, right?
Right, right. Yes.
And helps you kind of like increase your own value and your own worth in the work that you were doing day in and day out for your children.
Right. Yeah. It just reminded me too of just like how I've kind of evolved with what I consume on social media in regards to that specific culture around stay-at-home motherhood. And I, for me, I really had to like, I don't follow um, much of people who kind of have the like perfect home, right? Or like the aesthetic kitchen and what I mean by that is so for me personally, when I see these accounts, and I'm also talking about the accounts that are too are like that are that are funny or that are making jokes or they tend to have a lot of followers and their houses are just like ginormous and gorgeous and yeah, I find that for me if I watch too much of that I start to look at like my environment as like, oh my God, this dish was in the sink. There's this, there's that. Like my kitchen's so old. This place is so small. Like my nervous system responds to that and it starts to become more stressed. I get overstimulated more easily. And I'm not saying I don't get overstimulated quite often. I do. But yeah, for me, when I started to follow more content that was like, hey, stay at home mom, like raising your kid is the work. It's not the laundry. It's not the dishes. It's not it's not having these things.
Yeah.
Like when I started kind of absorbing more of that, it just felt it just feels different, right? Like
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
feel different. I feel more at ease. I feel more appreciative. I feel more grateful.
Hmm. Yeah. And it makes sense that if you're watching, you know, well, first of all, Instagram is curated, right? Those people are
Yeah. Yeah.
curating their feeds to look a certain way. And it's
Yeah.
so easy for us to start to believe that that's just normal when probably in the background they've got like a nanny or,
Yeah.
extra
Yeah.
help or, whatever it is. It's
Right.
not usually the truth of the situation, right? And like you've kind of said, it makes you start kind of looking around at your own life like, oh, suddenly mine's not good enough. And it
Mm-hmm.
instead of feeling gratitude for what you do have, I even kind of did this with the whole like Montessori
Yeah,
thing
that's a good
when I
one. That's a good
when I had
example.
my daughter. I got the little shelf and I got the little
Yeah.
trays and put the
Yeah.
toys on the trays, and it was so pretty. Did she
Yeah.
use it? No, she chucked the toys off the shelf. They were always on the floor, so I got rid of the shelf.
Yeah.
And really what I realized is that Montessori is a philosophy. It is not
Right.
the
Right.
things you buy. Like so many of the,
Yeah.
baby kind of things that they say you should have and buy, and your nursery needs to look a certain way. Like
Mm-hmm.
really, once you figure it out, it's not about any of that. It's about your presence. It's about how you're interacting. It's the love that you're showing, and none of that can be purchased or bought, or none of it can look a certain way. But I think this just really goes to show like what a weird time we're living in, where like Instagram and social media has such power over us, right? Like
Yeah.
generations before us, this wasn't the case. And I think what we're kind of getting to here, and the main message here, is that we really do need to be mindful and conscious of our consumption and of what we're looking at day in and day out, because like you've said, it subtly starts to creep into your own nervous system and the way you feel about your own life and your own
Mm-hmm.
mothering, and it can make you start questioning, what you're doing. Am I doing it right? I'm not good enough. I'm not like that mother. And really,
Mm-hmm.
I think the antidote to that is, yeah, like learning to be so secure in your own choices and in your own trusting yourself, just trusting
Right.
yourself. And I know that's not easy
Right.
for a lot of people because of so many reasons, but I think that's really kind of what we're getting to here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that the security and trust in yourself does help when it comes to using discernment and like seeing that there's nuance and like, oh, this they're talking about this, but it doesn't apply to me, so like I can keep
Yeah.
scrolling instead of getting offended by it, right?
Yes.
um that to me says like, oh, I'm secure in my choice to do A, B, and C, right? And yeah, there's this other piece you had said too that kind of sparked something, was that Instagram or social media in general, whatever it is that you're on, is you're just getting a snapshot of what it is, right? We're not seeing everything that's behind them, right? The pretty kitchen or whatever. And yeah, I think a lot of us rationally know that.
Hmm.
Like I think a lot of us can like intellectually be like, yeah, like I know that. Like I do the same
Hmm.
thing on Instagram, right? Like
Yeah.
you didn't know that I had a meltdown this morning over, I don't know, the dishes in the sink or the baby teething right now and crying a lot. And, so I'm not going to share that. That's not what today's about or this post is about, right? Like, I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of rationally we know that. And that's where I think if we're not scrolling consciously, it starts to like move into like our stress response. And when our stress is activated, we aren't thinking rationally as
Hmm.
much. We're absorbing it, and like you had said earlier, in this conversation, when you just keep going, right? You just keep scrolling. You keep now, maybe you've liked a few of those things and you're getting more similar things like that.
Hmm.
And so now you're getting flooded
Hmm.
with this stuff and high stress in your body.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and that has consequences, and it can you know, contribute to you seeing your journey, your story, your relationship, your home in a way that you didn't intend to.
And I think it's interesting. It kind of goes both ways though, right? Like the AI
Yeah.
or whatever, the algorithm of social media is meant to show you more of what you like or what you interact
Right.
with, right? So
Sure.
really
Yeah.
like it pigeonholes people,
Yeah.
even, on both sides or whatever you want to, in
Mm-hmm.
each and every
Mm-hmm.
subculture,
Right.
like all of a sudden all I'm seeing is like these homestead when they have chickens and even that it
Yeah.
takes it to an extreme in all directions. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah. So
Totally.
even with like the home birth, oh, home birth
Mhm.
is the way, rah
Yeah.
rah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but it isn't actually attainable for some people for whatever reason, medical reasons, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it pigeonholes you and starts, yeah, again, it takes discernment to know what
Mm-hmm.
is for you, what is not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to know and accept that there are other opinions and other options, and not all of them are going to align with you. And so it's really about figuring it out what your values are and what is important to you and
Right. Right.
why you're making these decisions. Like, am I
Yeah.
buying a Montessori shelf because someone on Instagram told me to? Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I really liked how that looked. Yeah.
yeah, right? Like I needed to check myself. Like, hey, this is ridiculous. Like I also was that person that made this
Yes.
beautiful nursery. My daughter still sleeps in our bed, and there's no
Yeah.
sign of
Yeah.
her ever using this bedroom until she's like
Right.
10, probably. So, so I
Yeah.
had to really like step back and be like, okay, wait a minute. Why did I do this? To take a picture and post it on social media? Yeah, kind of. And like that hurt
Mm-hmm.
a little to realize, but
Yeah. Oh, well, I think too, there's this, you just reminded me of something too, of just like this. I think for some of us too, there's this desire, or we make up a story about that kind of community.
yeah.
Like we're making up this narrative of like, those are the kinds of mom friends I want that
Mhm.
have this beautiful nursery and have this, like, because it's not just the nursery. We've created this other narrative that goes along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's like who I'll be if
Yes.
like a
Yes.
story
Yes.
around who will I be if I have that?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like, oh, this will get easier for me when I blank. I'll feel less stressed about this when I do this, right? Like, just insert whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I definitely think there's like a destination piece there.
Mhm. Another piece of motherhood culture that you had listed on there was parenthood bringing us closer as partners. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah. I just like personally, I really feel sad for mothers who feel like, and parents in general, it doesn't have to be just mothers, but I don't follow a lot of dads. For couples who feel like roommates after kids, it's just not something I want to be a normal, acceptable part
Mhm.
of our life. And I do kind of think, I think all these kind of things tie into one another, but it almost reminds me a little bit of like the losing yourself in motherhood
Mhm.
culture as well. It's like, oh, I've also lost, I don't know who my partner is anymore. I've seen that kind of content of like, we don't know each other anymore. We have to learn who we are again. And again, I do think parenthood is just another level of expansion. Like you're
Mhm.
still who you are, and now this other thing, right? And perhaps maybe that has brought attention to some wounds in your relationship
Mhm.
that were there before, but were easier to ignore, because you both weren't taking care of this like tiny human, and it's just not something that I feel like people should just accept as
Mhm.
just the normal way.
Yeah. What's coming up for me right now is like, I totally agree with you.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of this falls on the mother to kind
Mm,
of figure out and change and prioritize and make sure it doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well, where are the dads? Where are the
absolutely.
men or the partners? Like
Uh-huh.
ensuring that this doesn't happen. And if you are feeling like roommates after having a baby, like there's two of you
Yep.
in the relationship or more, whatever, but there's probably two of you in the relationship. Like it requires both of
Yes.
you to prioritize this. And I think it does most of the time fall on the mother, on the woman to be doing the research and figuring out, okay, well, how do we fix this? How do we change this? And it's just
Hmm.
more and more that's like piled up on women to initiate
Right.
and figure out.
Right.
And maybe
Right.
that's not actually true. And maybe that's like another one of those like examples of that overculture seeping in. But
Well, I think that's definitely true for some people, though.
yeah.
Like I do think that there are people who are in relationship like that,
Mhm.
and where there are women taking way too much responsibility
Mhm.
for fixing it or wanting to fix it, which we know will impact all these other things, will impact your level of intimacy. It will, yeah, it kind of goes back into the like, my husband feels like another child, or like, yeah, in no way do I think that like women should just see these things differently, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's not the message. The message isn't like, if you're feeling this way, just don't.
Yeah.
you know, it's like, okay, right? Like, if you're feeling this way, that's for a reason. And it's up to both adults to kind of figure that out and navigate that. And it should be important to both of them, because if it's not, then yeah, you're going to get exactly what you're describing, of just like this culture of like infantilizing men, and like women are the ones who are doing all this research and all this work and want to improve their relationships, and looking through the courses and buying the courses and looking through the content and sending the content to their husbands, or like whatever it is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
comes back to kind of what you said at the beginning. Like it's all about just not accepting breadcrumbs, right? And raising the
Right.
bar for what we should be accepting as normal and normalized in our
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And it's not lost on me that like we're kind of talking on the individual level, but it's not lost on me that, this has to also be changed at the institutional level as well and the governmental level and all of that. Like that's not lost on us in this conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm all about radical personal responsibility. So
Yeah. Well, I think there's like meaning there, because I think it certainly helped me shift things from my first experience in motherhood to my second and third, was kind of surrounding myself with people who were living in alignment with what my intuition was telling me. And that did become my personal culture. That did become like what was normal in my life. And again, like, just according to the conversation we're having on Instagram, like I get humbled every once in a while, because I sometimes still like, I curate my feed and like who I follow so much that like it's just normal, right? Like my values and like the way
yeah.
I do things is just normal. It's just normal. And then so when somebody comes into that space and is like, you're totally mom shaming people who don't want to co-sleep by saying skin to skin is an essential sleep, infant sleep, like thing. If I like am criticizing the like, I'm blanking on the word, newborn sleep essentials. I've criticized
Yeah.
that before, and I've said like, you don't need any of that crap. Like, you need your baby on your skin, like, just so you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I've had people be like, you're shaming people who don't want to co-sleep, and like, I get humbled, because I'm like, oh my God, that's right. Like, this is not the normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
like in that way where I'm like, oh crap. Yeah, there's still that whole mainstream thing. Yeah, like
Yeah.
yes.
Just to kind of like summarize a little bit, and I've kind of already said this, but what I have kind of gained from this is that it comes down to really being mindful and conscious of your consumption on whether it's social media or whatever, anything that you're consuming, and being
Yeah.
aware of how easily those things can affect how you see your life and your mothering and
Mhm.
can affect how you make decisions about your family. And yeah, using critical thinking and discernment is so important. Yeah, so thank you. That's been great. It's been a good reminder because I think we all do just like unconsciously do this all day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really like, yeah, if I could say like one main like thing to echo that is just check in with yourself as you're consuming that stuff, right? Like, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel alone? Does it make you feel self critical? Does it make you feel guilty? Does it make you feel not enough? Is there stress? Like just check in with what's coming up as you're absorbing this stuff. And yeah, then I think everything you just said will come more naturally.
Mhm. Yeah. So, Amanda, thank you so much. Where can we connect with you?
So I am free as a mother on Instagram, with dots in between each word. And yeah, that's where I'm sharing content and having conversations with women. And you can access some of my work through there.
Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 10 of the Well Nourished Mother podcast. I'm really eager to hear what you thought of this one. So I know we touched on some spicy topics, and everyone has their own opinion and perspective. So, of course, I would love to hear your thoughts. Come join the conversation on Instagram at Nest and Nourish. All right, see you next time.